everybody. This is Liam. Before we jump into this week's episode on John Patrick Shanley's Doubt, starring Philip Seymour Hoffman and co-hosted by Caitlin Mae Burke, I wanted to let you know that we are aware that today is Monday. It's not Wednesday. Usually we drop our episodes on Wednesdays, but we wanted to drop this one a little early, and that's because Caitlin Mae Burke, our co-host, and Mark Pagan, who co-hosted our episode on Along Came Polly, do a show called Other Men Need Help. And tomorrow, October 8th, from 6:30 to 8:30, they're doing a show at Caveat in Manhattan. Join host and producer Mark Pagan of the award-winning podcast Other Men Need Help and some very talented friends as they share stories, secrets, songs, and surprises about the ways they've avoided accountability, clung to power, masked insecurities, and quietly screamed for connection. There's going to be some guests, Gaster Almonte, Elna Baker, Henry Alford, and a few others are going to be there. It's a $10 event. It's going to be great. Mark always puts on a good show. Caitlin and Mark are two of our favorite human beings in the whole world, and we wanted to get this out so that we could point a few in the direction. I will say honestly, and I've said this before, that the way that we talk about these films and the way that we try to look at these films has definitely been influenced by the show that Caitlin and Mark do. So we hope you can make that event. That's really it. Tomorrow, October 8th at 6:30, the link to the Eventbrite will be in the notes for this episode. And also there'll be a link to an event at Brick, which is in downtown Brooklyn on October 18th. They're going to present a live episode of Other Men Need Help. So lots of cool opportunities to see them do their incredible work. That's just about it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. We are really excited about the way the show has grown over the past couple seasons, and we want to continue to grow. Upcoming episodes include our episode on Jack Goes Boating, which is a film Philip Seymour Hoffman directed and starred in. And looks like we're going to have a very great co-host in Adam Shartoff of Film Wax Radio. If you've never listened to Film Wax Radio, check it out. After we do that episode, George and I are going to return to the original format, just the two of us, to talk about Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master, starring Philip Seymour Hoffman. We're coming to the end of the Hoffman run, and there's a lot of controversy between George and I about The Master, so I thought we would just duke it out. Maybe we'll get a co-host like a friendly co-host who can help us out. I don't know, but that's coming up. That's it. We hope you enjoy this episode. This is a long intro. I apologize. Without further ado, here's more of me plus George and Caitlin. Enjoy. I'm Liam Billingham.
I'm George Fragopoulos.
I'm Caitlin Mae Burke.
And this is
Oeuvre Busters. I have to tell you.
Can we just briefly talk about these beautiful candles that we have here?
Caitlin, what are we looking at here?
Okay, so I set the scene.
I'm going to take a picture of it.
I have a lot of dollar store and grocery and bodega, like 35-hour devotional candles.
They're beautiful.
And so for tonight, I have a whole collection of them that's like behind George.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch. I'm like really serious about this. But these
really
are selected because we have, as you will recall in the film, when she puts up the picture of the Pope and
Yes.
Amy Adams says that's the wrong Pope, we have the correct Pope. We have
do.
John Paul II.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
We have one that had a wick long enough that I could light it. And also St. Clair, who is the patron saint of television, and I felt like maybe she could also be new.
There's a patron saint of television?
Yes.
That's pretty badass, actually. And you're saying she could also be the patron saint of podcasting.
Yeah.
Why not?
But why would we want candles that have devotional elements on them?
Because we're discussing
Good luck.
Doubt from 2008, starring, of course,
Meryl Streep.
It's Meryl Streep.
Amy Adams.
Amy Adams.
And Philip Seymour Hoffman. This, for me, by the way, was a
Viola
surprising
Davis.
Amy Adamsing. Like, I did not realize that she was in this film. And then I was
did
like,
a
duh,
lot
she's on
of
the
movies
fucking
together.
poster.
She did a lot of movies.
A lot
of movies?
Directed by John Patrick directed and written by John Patrick Shanley.
Yes.
Based on his play Doubt A Parable,
Parable.
which I really want to talk about that title.
Yeah.
And it's being redone. It's getting staged
No.
next year.
Oh, all right. I thought you meant the film
I
was
think it's
getting...
coming. No, they're remaking the movie with Jonah Hill.
Not a good look.
Yeah, they're doing it again this year.
The
I
play.
think. They're doing the play again this
I
year.
would definitely love to see that.
Would you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Why did you not? Okay, well, maybe we could just quickly go around. Did you not enjoy this?
No. Well, let's talk about what happens in the movie first.
Okay,
you know how this show goes,
very-
Caitlin. I'm sorry. You have to,
It's fine. I don't. I just keep talking on top of everyone.
You haven't talked on top of anyone.
I'm the guest.
Turning the
Yes.
mic. I have some things to say to you people.
Very quickly, this film is about Father Flynn, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Played by Brian F. O'Byrne on stage, who, if you know as an actor, is a really wonderful, exceptional
No idea
actor.
who he is.
You've seen him in a bunch of things.
Okay.
You just don't know who he is. 'Cause
Who
you're a Philistine.
is accused of inappropriate, obviously pedophilic behavior towards a student by Meryl Streep's character, Sister Aloysius.
Played by Sherry Jones on stage, who is best known as being probably the sheriff in the movie Signs, starring Mel Gibson.
Oof, it has been a while since I've seen Signs.
But she's a big stage actress. Got started and busted.
And
Sorry.
Amy Adams, who plays Sister... God, we're blanking on her
James.
name now. Thank
Sister
you.
James.
Sister James.
The film is dedicated to Sister
Yeah,
James.
it's kind of caught in between. She doesn't know who's right, who's wrong. And basically the film is about whether or not, in fact, Philip Seymour Hoffman is doing something terribly inappropriate with this child.
And they were all nominated for Oscars for
Yes,
this movie.
and they were
Plus,
they're incredible.
Viola Davis, who might be the best thing about the entire movie.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean...
has one incredible scene.
Yeah, she's incredible in the scene she's in, of course.
Yes.
But I felt like, she's just in that one scene.
Yeah, but she is amazing. in
She's
it.
amazing in it. No, of course. They're all amazing in it.
So worth noting, the original play, there was no one but the four people. There was no one but the four characters. So Sister
Yes.
Aloysius, Sister James, Father Flynn, and Viola Davis's character, whose name escapes me. Do you remember her name?
Mrs. Miller.
Mrs. Miller.
So the boys,
The boy
Donald
is not in
Miller.
the play.
And
The other boys.
Alice from Ghostbusters is not in the play.
And it's also very important to point out that the boy is African American, which
Yes.
obviously adds like another kind of dimension to the what unfolds. And it takes place in 1964.
In the Bronx.
Yeah,
Yes.
the boogie down,
The book.
as we call it here in New York.
You
Which I think they refer to it,
generally
don't they?
refer to it as the boogie
Well,
down.
Amy Adams says it a couple of times in the film, doesn't she? Like, this is how things happen in the boogie down.
When she flips her chair backwards and
Yeah.
tries to like really relate
Yeah,
to the
exactly.
young
She's,
like, throwing a
Irish and
baseball.
Italian
Throwing
Catholic
a
kids.
baseball in the air.
She's like, hey, kids.
It's just Michelle
Yeah,
Pfeiffer.
let's
Who
wrap.
at
Yeah,
this
in Dangerous Minds, of
table
course.
is Catholic or has a Catholic associations? Two
We're-
or three.
people
So
raising their
the only
hands
person
on a
who did not
podcast.
raise their hand is me.
And listen, I'm not trying to exclude you, but I think it's a valuable thing to go
I'm
out the
gonna put my
gate
mic
because
down.
I had I had a very visceral reaction to the Catholicism in this movie. Did you guys like? Did you wanted to ask about liking it? Did you like it?
I love this movie.
Oh wow, I
Yeah.
did not. Wow, I did not expect this.
Really? Yeah, I thought it was like one of those incredibly just well-crafted like Hollywood films, and I was like, wow, this film, because of the performances, because they all are fucking amazing. In
Okay.
It. So whenever any of them are on the screen, Viola Davis, Meryl Streep, Amy Adams, Philip Seymour Hoffman, of course.
The doubt when the doubt's on.
Oh, the doubt. Oh, all about the doubt. Which is really funny that Liam says that too, because for a really long time, I like sincerely kept texting him like, oh, when are we doing Faith? I really thought the film was called Faith. He's like, George,
Terrible
it's doubt.
title.
I was like, oh yeah, of course. And then like 2 or 3 days later, I was like, so Faith after Jack goes boating, before? I'm not exactly sure. He's
Which
like,
film are we talking about? I
think it's called Doubt.
Keeping the Faith.
So I really enjoyed it.
Caitlin?
I saw this in theaters in 2003 with my mom during Christmas, who is my Jewish parent, not my Catholic parent.
Right.
And rewatched it this weekend. And I remembered how I felt about it. And I think that I have maintained that conviction that it's a play and not a movie.
Oh, this is interesting.
So I enjoyed the performances. In like over the passage of time, I had a totally different emotional response to it. But I really felt that this is something that is like very written for the stage and very stagey, and there's a lot of attempts to make it more visual that I think are really flat.
Such as?
I just think it's such a chamber piece that I like.
Yeah.
Every time they start talking, I'm like, oh yeah, well you just moved to the other part, and then like the lights came up on the part that's the
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to, like, there really isn't that much action. There isn't that much staging.
Yes, and this okay. So this is interesting. So I teetered between like really loving it, like loving things about it, and also literally a few times like going like ugh. And a couple things that I went ugh at were the moment when she's like, I forget exactly how it happens, but it's like sometimes it takes a cat to catch a whatever.
Oh no,
and
that
you're
was
like,
really heavy-handed.
Jesus Christ, maybe this worked in a play, but like it doesn't. I just felt like it was overwrought. I felt
Yeah.
like the way that you're talking
Yeah.
about it falling flat. To me, I wrote down that it was overly directed.
Oh,
Yeah,
So
I
you
think-
think it was too heavy-handed?
Yes.
I don't know that it was overly directed as much as it is that there's not that much to do when all you need is people talking. And like
Yeah.
the performances are so incredible. But they're so incredible in this very stagey way that I feel like you can't escape.
Yes.
Whereas I was thinking about like Joe versus the Volcano, which is also
A John Patrick Shanley
also
movie.
right, but something where it's intensely visual, but it still has these like monologues that are very theatrical, but they happen in a way where like you're also just swept up in the majesty of the scene.
Yes.
This is something where it's like people talking in an office, people talking at a table, people talking in a yard, people talking
in a
at a
playground.
pulpit.
Yeah, at a pulpit.
And
Joe
I
versus
like
the
don't.
Volcano.
The performance is wonderful.
They're all really incredible. They all like, yeah, they're all. I mean, like that's the thing that I think is like I have my issues with Meryl Streep after like 1999.
I was surprised you weren't going to lead with that. Just be like, let your Meryl
yeah,
Streep
but
hate
she's
out.
really good in this.
Yeah.
And
She is?
She. I think she's a little overwrought, but I think that is because of the theatricality of, like, it's not my favorite Amy Adams performance in that it's like the least subtle Amy Adams performance where she's very like, hi. But I feel like that's true for everyone in the movie except for maybe Viola Davis, who's very like.
Yeah.
It's like very together. So let's talk a little bit about what was the stuff that you felt like was added for the film that wasn't there? Besides obviously like the locations and the shifts.
That was added?
That like clearly that's like was
Well,
was
I
put
also,
in for
I mean,
the
I also
film.
felt at times it was kind of stagey, but then I also kind of gave it the benefit of the doubt of those like moments where clearly it attempts to make use of like the exteriors and like the exterior shots. So I felt like it did do a decent job. For example, of, like that one scene that's kind of somewhat pivotal to her case, where she's like, "Oh, I saw you. I saw the young boy like take his hand away from you or his arm
Do
away
we
from you."
see that in the film?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do see it.
Yeah, that's right. It's towards the beginning, right? It's maybe
Yes.
15, 20,
Yeah.
20 minutes. That's right. Yeah. That's
And then
right.
there is also that one shot too where you see him put the shirt into the locker, into the boy's locker, and Amy Adams sees him do it, and they kind of
Yeah.
exchange a look. So I did feel like there were moments where it does try to kind of get out of its kind of
Yes.
staginess, as you put it. So those kind of moments for me were successful, but also I just felt like it was so. Like I did enjoy the fact that it was a chamber piece, and I did enjoy the fact that it felt so claustrophobic. And I always have one of these moments too when I see a film like this that I know is based on a play, and I think to myself, well, shit. Like, would I be giving it the benefit of the doubt for its
The benefit of the
staging?
what?
Oh, I did
The
not.
benefit of the what?
I did not do that on purpose.
The benefit of the what?
Benefit of the
benefit of
faith.
The benefit of the what?
If I didn't know it was a play.
Sorry, everybody.
But I also want to say, just like Joe versus the Volcano, very much a film about faith.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Joe versus the Volcano.
Oh,
So-
you
do you
go
guys
home
follow John Patrick Shanley on Twitter?
I do not.
I
Yeah.
do.
Oh, you do? He's-
Yeah.
Hilarious.
He has quite no. It's just like incredibly earnest, sometimes bordering on schmaltz, and sometimes you're like, "Are you fucking with me, John Patrick Shanley?"
I don't think he is.
No, I don't think he is either. But I
think
have
that is a
moments where I'm
pure
like,
person.
he probably is. I'm thinking, and I want to get your take on this because of there's the scene. Well, both of your takes, but there's the scene at dinner with the nuns. Mm-hmm. There's the first one that I was like, I really appreciate what this scene is doing in that you see sort of Meryl Streep help the Alice from Ghostbusters find her. This is the second movie in a
Yeah.
row that Alice from Ghostbusters has been in that we've talked about. She helps her find her fork, and then she sees Amy Adams like pull out the
Gristle.
gristle of the meat. And I was like, this is a great scene. And then it goes on and on. It felt like every attempt to sort of open it up went like he really was just like, God, do you guys get? It's a movie. It's not a play.
See, it's funny you should say that too, because I tweeted about this as soon as I started it. I was like, oh my God, thank God this is only an hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I saw it in two different sittings that it felt like it was very short. but it felt again like really kind of compact and tight. So like these moments that you're talking about of like, oh, it feels like it's like really long and overwrought. I was like, well, but the cat scene I fucking hated. Yes, that really kind of like hit you over the head. But I was like, I don't know, it just felt really just kind of compact and just like it felt like a play in that sense. It was like it felt like a play like in the best possible way.
It's a 1-act play.
Yeah.
90.
It feels like a
92
No
one-act
minutes.
intermission.
Yeah.
There's a quote from him being like, the second act is you going out and discussing
I
it with
read
the people
that.
you saw
Oh,
the play
brother.
with. And you're like, oh, what a theater thing to say. Ugh. So yeah, I feel like that moment, like there's all these really noble attempts to open it up, but most of them make you remind you that you're watching a play.
Which you also seem to like you were.
Yeah, I think I was I don't know that I was so conscious of it when I saw it when I was like 17, but I do remember, especially from this viewing, just like how into their close-ups they are in a way they're like, it's a movie. You can see his fingernails. It's a movie. You can look at this one little object forever because it's a movie.
Like
Whereas
the
like,
dancing doll thing.
yeah,
Or the Bible,
yeah,
the flowers in the Bible.
yeah. That you just like the really, really harping on these close-ups in a way where I was like, they don't really have that much significance other than it's like a flexibility of the form that you wanted to take advantage of. So
It's a
people
flex.
aren't. Yeah.
Of the form.
Yeah, that is, and it's the other thing that I struggled with watching it is deciding, because it's so dialogue driven. Like everything is revealed through dialogue. Like you make the point of like you see her he puts the shirt in the locker, or you see him like hug the little boy. But then later on, she'll be like, I saw you. And you're like, yeah, we know that you saw. Like, I don't know how you address that stuff. I don't know.
But that's, I mean, but to be fair, isn't that also a kind of the idea of like that kind of direct claim being maybe kind of not something that a nun would say to like a priest,
Yeah.
you know, like an accusatory kind of way, like, hey,
Yeah.
I saw you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where also this film like does say interesting things potentially about gender, where clearly there's like a gender dynamic here.
Yeah.
Like the scenes where he's always like sitting in her chair are really
those are
kind of
good.
interesting.
Office. Yeah.
And it's not really, they don't speak about it or say anything about it. So for those of you who haven't seen it, what happens is when
I'm thinking, I'm working.
yeah,
it through.
Yeah.
when Philip Seymour Hoffman goes into Meryl Streep's office, he sits in her chair, just kind of uninvited, and just does it, like plops in. And it's just kind of like those interesting moments too, where there are these like gender politics at play. And so the idea of like, I saw you, yeah, it sounds kind of silly because, well, we saw you see
How did you
him.
guys react to that watching it?
What, the gender
Like,
politics?
or him,
or-
no, specifically
Yeah.
the moment of him sitting down.
See, that's, I mean, so she's the principal of the school, but he has the power. And so I think that that's also like, that's what got me this time. And I can get into like so much of why I was like weeping really, really hard at the end of this movie, but not for the reason that I was so unsettled by it the first time I saw it, which just comes with like age and the experience of being a woman and understanding power dynamics in a different way. But like when that happened, I was just like, motherfucker.
Yeah.
And like, and it is such it's such a power move from the beginning, and you like it's seeding how it's going to turn out. That like that's her chair, that's her office, this is her purview, she's in charge, and he can still take her chair and relegate her to the side and just like take all of that power away because of his position. And I think that that's what stands out to me about the dinner scene with the nuns is that it goes on forever and it's so joyless, so that when you watch the like carnality of the priests together,
Yeah.
where
It's
they're
a
like
Cassavetes
eating
movie for 45 seconds.
yeah, that it's like, I mean, it's basically Goodfellas, except there's no women there, but they're just like eating steak and like
Get
yucking it
goofing
up.
and drinking whiskey.
Well, and they're making
and
Yeah.
there's a
fun
picture
of
of
they're
beer.
making fun
Yeah.
of one of the children's mom, right? They're like saying like, oh, she's fat.
Talking about someone
Yeah.
being fat.
Yeah, and and
Yeah.
the one priest says to Father Flynn's like, "Oh, you're wicked," which
Right,
is
right,
also like a very
right.
kind of like important, I think, moment because obviously it does suggest that in fact he is wicked potentially.
That's true. And I think that like, so I think a huge part of talking about those scenes where he sits down is to talk about Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance in this movie, which is
Yeah.
like core to the thing, but also as someone that grew up going to church, not every Sunday, but most Sundays until I was confirmed at the age of 14, and then never going to church except for, I was a Creaster, so I'd go at Christmas and Easter.
What's the term?
Creaster.
Yeah, Creaster Christians.
You've never heard of a Creaster?
Never heard of a Creaster
We were
Christian.
not Creasters. We went every Sunday.
Uh-huh.
Then why were you allowed to be a Creaster Christian? Because you had been like confirmed in the eyes of the Lord, and it was
So
your
here's the
decision?
deal. My mother, my parents are both from South Boston. Mm-hmm. My mother went to church Irish Catholics. My father was an altar boy. Mm-hmm. He would serve 3 masses on Saturday and 4 masses on Sunday. It was basically a full-time job.
Damn.
Mm-hmm. So watching this film, I had this moment of like I had this moment where I was like, fuck, I just grew up accepting this stuff. Like, and it's not that now that I'm grown up, I sit and reflect on the like really fucked up power dynamics of the Catholic Church, but like to sort of see it realized in this film made me go like, it's just so easy to accept this stuff when you're raised in it.
That's when I saw it in 2003, and I was like old enough to be at the movies as my mom's peer, and like just the two of us going. And so my mom is Jewish, my dad is Irish Catholic. I was raised Jewish, but my dad was the only one of his siblings who didn't convert.
Right.
And so when my grandparents, like, we were Creaster Christians, and also whenever we were at my grandparents or if they came to visit us. So I like went to mass a fair amount for a like Jewish child.
Right.
And it was not optional that like whenever they were going, my dad wouldn't go by himself necessarily, but if they were in town or if we were in town with them, like we always went. And my grandmother, when she was like suffering from really advanced dementia before she was in a memory unit, she would like sneak out to church.
Whoa.
And my dad had to be like, listen, this is the Catholic channel. The church is coming into your room, because she was too frail to like walk down the aisle. It was like a big church with a long aisle. And so he was worried she was going to hurt herself because no one was keeping track of whether or not she had permission to like sneak out.
Yeah.
But so like her last acts of rebellion were like trying to go to mass. But so I have a different perspective than you do, because I had the distance of like, I'm always here as a spectator.
Right.
I'm always here with a great deal of respect and a lot of understanding of the tradition. And I can like do the call and response because I've been around it. But it's never been my faith. But when the movie ended, my mom just turned to me and goes, "Don't think your dad should see this one." Ooh. But then later in life, we discussed it, not because of doubt, but she talked about it and she was like, he has sworn up and down that nothing happened. And he said, I would tell you if something did, and I don't know about my brothers, because he was having a really, really hard time as a Catholic person dealing with what was happening in the church and feeling complicit in some way. But he's like, but it wasn't my experience. And I'd tell you if it was my experience. And I don't believe that it wasn't someone else's, but it just wasn't mine. And so I like, I've just been raised not to question the church, and my experience doesn't lead me to question the church.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's a film that I thought about whilst watching this, which is Spotlight.
Of course,
It's a movie that I love. I love the investigative kind of like procedural element of it. I think that's really great. But the scene that I think people forget about a lot is the scene where Rachel McAdams like gives the the article to her grandmother, and her grandmother, who's like goes to church every Sunday, or probably went to church every day, because there are Irish Catholics that do that in Boston. I mean, everywhere, but it's Boston. There's like a scene where she's reading it and she asks, she's like, "Can I have a drink of water?" And you're like, she says that to her, like, she's like, "Sure, Grandma." And she goes and gets it. And I'm like, that's like every aunt or uncle in my family reading that thing in 1990, whatever. And when that film came out, my mom was like, "I don't want to see it. I don't need to see it." Like, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
When Spotlight came out.
Yeah. She was like, because I was like, I saw Spotlight. It's amazing. And she was like, "Yeah, I don't think I'm going to watch that. I'm not going to go see that in the theater." And I was like, "Oh, you should." She was like, "I don't need to. I know what it is." And you're just like, because these are people that's like, whose lives are really affected by it. So to bring it back to the movie, I think that one of the most amazing things about the movie is it like contextualizes this stuff in a present tense that makes it a lot more powerful than even Spotlight is able to make it, which is like, that's all memory or looking back. Whereas this is like, this shit happened all the time. These guys just got moved around.
Yeah. That's what really fucked me up this time.
Right.
And I think that's also that I was younger. I had not been I like understood that this was true about the church, but hadn't been exposed to it. But also like now I've seen The Keepers, I've seen like Spotlight, I've seen all of this. I've interacted with a lot more people and a lot more abuse. And I think that's also what stood out to me about Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance, especially in the context of this year, watching Leaving Neverland and watching like pedophile grooming behaviors and sort of that like watching him as a predator,
Yeah.
which is just, it's a brilliant performance and like really, really chilling. But what hit me about this is like, not only did he get moved, he got promoted.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's like, you have to ask a nun to get the truth. And the minute that she says that, he immediately knows that like the jig is up.
Yeah. I spent most of the movie being like, he didn't do anything. Like, and I really think that's a byproduct of like wanting to trust these guys. Cause like we had a priest at my church that like my mother venerated. Like, would still probably be like he was the best guy in the world. And like that might entirely be true, but the whole thing is obviously like profoundly tainted by. So I spent most of the movie being like, Meryl's like, I really felt this way. And then I questioned it. I was like, Meryl Streep's wrong. Sister Aloysius is wrong. This guy's great. And then I had to reckon with that a little bit because I was like, that's really, and that's like I think it's a legitimate reaction to the movie when you're raised in it a little bit to be like, no, he's fine. He just likes the kid.
Wait,
but the
hold
mounting circumstantial. I'm not saying it's the right reaction, but it's like the inherent cultural reaction. That
I mean, did you either like walk away thinking like he did or he didn't do it? Because obviously, like I walked away thinking, well, clearly it's supposed to end on complete and utter uncertainty.
Of course,
Yeah.
but you want to figure it out for yourself, right? Like that's a human tendency is to want to know.
When it was done for me, I was like, well, okay, so like, and obviously we could talk about it in more detail, but when the film finished, there's more than one way to
nope.
take.
Nope.
There's only one
There's
interpretation.
no ambiguity in art. Move on, George.
There's two possible ways to think about Meryl Streep's final words, where she says, I have doubts. Is obviously I have doubts about whether or not he did or didn't do it, or whether or not she has doubts. The way I read it is like, okay, now she has doubts about her own faith. So like for me, it was more about
there's
the
a
absence
third
of God.
way to read it.
That it's about like, well, this like there's always uncertainty in the Boogie Down Bronx. Yes, of course, everybody knows that. That's just daily living in the Boogie Down Bronx.
Which I think is the most problematic way to read it. The film opens with a sermon about doubt. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that is like, so the introduction of her character I found to be totally absurd. Like this like boogie woman who's like walking down the, like get your, that kind. I was like, oh God. And also admittedly I have a Meryl Streep thing, but I also think that I was just like, oh God, here we go. Meryl's going to just, and she didn't. But there's a third way to read it, which is the idea that in that opening sermon, he is provocative about doubt in a way that she can't comprehend it. And she's threatened by that. And the threatening of that is what leads her to lead this from a certain perspective charge against him, which again is just like, that was my reaction to so the last line of the movie is her saying, I still have doubts, and she starts crying, right? Yeah. And so I read that as like, does she have doubts about her faith? Does she have doubts about what she's done? Or does she have doubts about, or is this telling me that she's had some kind of visceral reaction to this guy's way of treating the church, which he thinks the church needs to evolve, it needs to change? So is it like, is she threatened by what he's bringing to the church? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sort of like, is she, does she have doubts about her like methodology of Catholicism as opposed to like doubting God?
I think it's about the methodologies of Catholicism, and that's what she has doubt about. Because I ultimately think that's kind of what the movie's about a little bit. It's a changing 1960s, like it's a totally different. It's the church had to. I mean, this is Vatican II. I don't know how up you guys are on this stuff, but like that's a big, like the joke is the Mel Gibson families. They were like, Mel Gibson's family was like, we refuse to recognize Vatican II, and I believe that was like early 60s, kind of like a shift in the church.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I just don't know anything about that history.
Why not?
Because
I'm
just a historian in the Boogie Down Bronx. That's why.
Anyway.
But I don't, I mean, I think that when I watched it the first time, when I was like a younger, fresher Daisy, I think I had a more like complicated view, and the end really played into that, and I wasn't sure. And with this, I was like, 100% he touched that kid. This is a thing that happens, and Meryl Streep is doubting whether she has ever successfully protected anyone from anything in a patriarchal society where she is largely going to be ineffective. And it's sort of one of those things where it's like, everything, I sort of saw her as something like, everything I do, even if it's not nice, is to like protect and serve the youth so that they grow up to be like good,
Yes.
like moral young people and young adults and like shape the country. And she can't do anything about it because everyone who's harming them just gets a higher throne.
Right.
And so it's sort of like, what's the point of any of this? And that's also sort of how I read Amy Adams saying, I saw you, that it's like outrageous that she would say that out loud, but she also has to say it to convince herself that like she has to say it out loud because if she doesn't, then it's very easy to make it not real, which is what she desperately, desperately wants. And like what she immediately goes into in kind of like a shrill way at the end of the scene, which is like, this is fine. He said it's fine. We're just going to pretend it's fine.
Yeah.
Which is also showing like, it's not fine. And so for me, the whole movie, I was just like, Predator, this dude, like I'm 100% sure.
Yeah.
I think in like the first scene where he's like giving him a toy and sort of like playing with the outsider, that didn't read as anything more than kindness to me. And then like beyond that, 100%. And it's all just grooming.
Well, it's interesting. And I think it's one thing that I think that's really powerful about the movie is the fact that as a woman in a patriarchal society, like, and also a hyper-specific, hyper-local patriarchal society, like, to compromise your values as a woman is to move further away from God, which is probably the most devastating thing for that character, is that she has to move away from God.
Yeah.
Because he basically says that you do. Like,
and she says that you do.
Yeah, she says that you do. Whereas the men are all allowed to just, like, get better jobs working for God, essentially. Like, that was the most devastating thing to me to watching it. But I think that this also speaks to, like, breaking it down, which is like, this might be, it's not the flashiest, but there's so much complexity to Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance in this movie. Yeah. Because I find him immensely likable in general. I mean, he's just likable. Like, we did a podcast about him. It's because he's likable, and he exudes this kind of like, and this is really interesting to think about retroactively in terms of like the really valuable sort of work that's going on in terms of revealing what these guys were like, but also just patriarchal bullshit, nice guy stuff in general, is that you watch him and you go like, yeah, like I want to listen to that guy's sermon. I want to be around that guy. And they do a nice job of placing you in the position of understanding how he relates to the young boy. Like there's the scene where gets challenged. There's a scene where she first accuses him, and then there's a moment where the boy his books get knocked out of his hands by some shitty kid who's the one who pulls away from Philip Seymour Hoffman, who he probably also touched
or tried, but he was more enfranchised and empowered.
Yes.
So he's not as easily a victim because his parents are white and could be louder.
Right. And then the moment before that happens, Father Flynn looks at the kid and then looks away. And it's like, it's so powerful because like, does he look away because he doesn't want to be seen with this kid because he's worried about his reputation, or because he's like, fuck, they're on.
But then he hugs him.
him. And he not only hugs him, he like might kiss him on the forehead.
Yeah,
like,
he like brings him into his chest. Yeah.
And it's just like there's so much space in the performance for you to put your own.
Well, he's so convincing when he's arguing and he's kind of saying like, I'm innocent. Like, what are you doing to me? You're destroying my reputation. It comes across as being so. Yeah, he's just kind of. It sounds like what an innocent man would sound like.
What is an innocent man? What does innocent sound like,
Philip
George?
Seymour Hoffman.
Oh,
in doubt.
Damn it.
But I think one of the interesting things though that you're both bringing up is what to make. So one of the things that I kept thinking about, with the backdrop of everything we know about how fucked up all these priests have been and the Catholic Church, and covering all this up, thinking about like what the purpose of this film even is, if it's trying to, let's say, cast doubt, there it goes again, on this, on whether or not this or that does not happen. Because again, there's very things like, we know it happened. We know it happened all the time. We know all these people were promoted. So then are you supposed to, again, just be like, oh, actually, yes, Sister Aloysius was totally right. He was grooming this child. All that creepy shit about like the fingernails, all that stuff is about, again, this kind of process of grooming the child. And he, in fact, is a pedophile. So part of me was, and I don't have an answer to this, but part of me was just kind of constantly thinking of like, well, what's the point of, let's say, even having us question whether or not he did or did not, if we know there's this huge history of priests in the Catholic Church, in fact, doing this?
Yes. So it's like almost a numbers thing in a
Well,
way.
it was just kind of funny because thinking even about the title where it's changed to like Doubt a Parable, and one of the other things I kept thinking about while I was watching this was Arthur Miller's Crucible, which is clearly an allegory for McCarthyism. And kind of think about how this though isn't at all allegorical because it
It's not even a parable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's a
That's my
bullshit
point.
name.
It's not even a parable.
Doubt. It's not even a parable. Doubt 2. Not a
Not a
parable.
parable. Which again, I think is, all, but maybe possibly what redeems it in that kind of context is again the ending, which to me is like, well, then the film is really more about like the potential absence of God than it is even about this particular like did he or did he not, or does the Catholic Church
God
have?
really figures into it.
Well, for me, I had to kind of bring that in because otherwise, then it was like again this really just heavy-handed, not at all allegorical, not at all a parable.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. So there's a few people in the sort of the theater world that I know that find this movie pretty repugnant because if it's using the molestation of children as a way to get at a parable, that's
Exactly.
really
Yeah.
problematic because like. If you want a movie about absence of God, like I got a movie for you. It's called Silence, and it came out 2 years ago, and no one saw it. But
I
me.
saw it as well.
Yay!
I was going to say Ad
And
Astra.
I think it's that's also a absent God movie.
Yeah.
But I thought it was amazing, and it's one of the best films about the absence of God imaginable. So it doesn't fit. This movie is too realistic or too stuck in like a specific moment for that to feel appropriate.
Right.
So I'm glad they got rid of a parable for the title of the film.
Also hard to sell anything with a colon.
Yeah, no, totally.
Think about movies that have a like break in their title, like Perfume, a something.
Oh, I love
some-
Was that a
Perfume.
What's the
romance?
other half of Perfume?
Was that a romance?
A love story
Love
or
story?
something
Yeah.
like that. Perfume.
Maybe they should have gone Doubt, a parable about the Boogie Down Bronx. That would have worked.
Boogie Down, a parable about doubt.
Oh, even better.
Ooh. Mission Impossible films have a colon in them, so
Yeah.
Do I guess the Fast and the Furious movies do not.
I don't know. I've never seen Fast and the
Really?
Furious written in text.
Oh.
I've only seen the first one.
Wasn't it Hobbs, Shaw?
Hobbs colon.
I guess not.
I can't wait to see that movie.
But I'm so
I'm very serious.
Vanessa Kirby's in it. She's in Mission Impossible Fallout. I celebrate all the work
Some
of all
of
the
my
artists.
favorite wrestlers are in it because
Really?
they're native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jason Statham.
Yeah.
Close.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, I
Is
think
there
a
a
little bit.
different guy? Yeah, I feel like that's also really one of the things that's really powerful about this movie is the moment when she says like, "Oh, I talked to a." So, what did you think of the end when she says, "I was lying. I didn't talk to a nun"? What's the reaction to that?
Oh, it confirms 100% his guilt.
That's the most
Yeah.
like obvious evidence that in fact he's guilty.
So
Yeah.
again, dealing with
'Cause he
my
freaks
own
out.
inherent born problematic Catholicism, I was like, she didn't actually. Like, I got outraged for a second, and then
Wow.
but then had to really go like, no, idiot. That confirms that she's right. Like it's from the moment he goes like, wait, and she comes back into the room. I remember being like, no. Like I really didn't want this guy to have done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I know that's like to be frank, that's pretty much wishful thinking. But it's just like that was sort of the grip of the movie that I was in, that I spent some part of the movie being like, I spent some part of the movie thinking like she was the bad guy. I
Well,
really
no,
did.
because-
Yeah.
No, because I think obviously, but I think the film invites you to do that. Of course, there are moments where you're like, oh my god, she is kind of like being, especially also okay. I think the scene with Viola Davis is also important.
I want to talk about this
because
scene.
there are where Viola Davis basically says like, you realize you're totally potentially fucking my child's chances of getting into a good high school and then getting into a good college.
Yeah.
So if your pursuit of this, if you're wrong, is also going to totally destroy my child's future.
It's really good
And-
conflict.
Yeah, and that's one
Yeah.
of those moments where you're kind of like, well, if she's wrong, and obviously the film suggests that she might be wrong, then she's totally doing something that's totally going to destroy this kid's future. So yeah, you're like, she's the bad guy. I mean, I don't think you end with thinking that she's the bad guy, but there are moments in which you're like, yeah, she's the bad guy.
Yeah. I think that's super intentional. And I also say that like that's what I love about Philip Seymour Hoffman, that I've been like in love with him from before I can remember. He's one of my favorites. I was devastated when he died.
Yeah.
I always like I'm like just deeply like I had the biggest crush and always, and I'm like, oh no, you're kind of a skeevy bad guy. It's fine, I still love you.
Yeah, he's
and like
so
he's
lovable.
such a great bad guy because he's so lovable and he's so unassuming. And in this, I just watch and it's like it's part of the predatory behavior, but just watching him be so boyish.
Yes.
And watching him be
Yeah.
so
Showing
like
him to shoot
kind.
basketball.
Yeah.
Well, and also the scene with the girl goes up to him and she's like, "Hey, I'm in love. I figured out who I'm in love with." And she's like, "Oh," and he's like, "Who?" And it's like this kind of like tender scene.
He's very friendly
Yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
very sweet, and that's it's one of the things that's smart about this movie is maybe that I doubt very much is in the
So we did very good.
I feel like you
Sorry,
have
go
to have a
ahead.
sound
Ding,
effect
ding, ding.
now.
Yeah. Editor's note: add a sound effect when we say doubt. Also get a haircut. But there's the bit where that wouldn't be in the play. Like there's no way that's in the
Correct.
play. Because you could imagine
Yeah.
the play, him being like talking to a character off stage,
Yeah.
being like, "Oh, you're in love," and it'd be atrocious and like
Great.
a
Don't tell him.
Marie or whatever her name is. Which is those little ticks are really nice. And I think to come back to the idea of close-ups, like one thing that the movie does get right is it creates the feeling of being in a Catholic church with all its airiness and all its ornateness, but everything is slightly kind of like beaten up because it's a community space that people are coming in and out of. Like the moment when he's teaching the kids basketball, the sweatshirt that he's wearing and the Converse All-Stars on his feet are so just like, yeah, this is what the friendly priest from the neighborhood
Would be
is
wearing.
doing. You know what I mean? And he's like, as is always the case with Phil Hoffman, he looks not like a movie star. He looks like almost the antithesis of what a male movie star would look like. So you're like, I trust this guy. Like it's such a smart. And the guy who played him in the play, Brian F. O'Byrne, is this like very skinny, perpetually 50-year-old looking bald guy. So you watch him and you're like, he would not work on the film. I think he works quite well in the play because it's a different experience and he's a great actor, but you wouldn't be like, I mean, Phil Hoffman had to have been 39, 40 when he did this movie because he died. Actually, maybe younger. I'm going to look that up. Vamp for me, guys.
Start running around the table.
This movie was 2008.
2008.
No, 2003.
2008.
2008?
Yeah.
Oh. I wasn't 18 in 2008. I was 20.
You're like, wait, what does
The
that
play,
mean?
I think, was 2003.
That's what I got confused
Which is
with.
actually also really surprising.
He was
I mean,
40.
I know 2004.
He was 40.
is the
40
play.
years old. And he looks like he's 28. He looks
He
Yeah.
got the
so
little baby
young.
face.
Yeah.
Baby face.
Got that baby face.
It's got that baby face. Where do you? We've talked about previous episodes of the show. Big Phil, Little Phil.
Ooh.
So like Big Phil would be.
Well, we don't know which Phil it is, right? Because if he's innocent, then he's
can
little
I
Phil.
just finish my
Oh,
sentence?
sorry, sir.
So
Sorry.
Big Phil would be
Sorry, I
like
had to see
Mission
that, Caitlin.
Impossible 3, the Master, the sort of like ferocious alpha male Phil, and the beta male Phil. And I feel like he leans more towards beta male in
Yeah.
general. Would be Boogie Nights as Scotty, and maybe his part in
Dusty and
Lovely's,
Twister.
yes, Dusty and Twister. This to me is a closet alpha male in
Yeah.
a beta
Closet alpha
male's
male.
body. So it's somewhere smack in the middle.
Yeah. I agree.
That's fair. Yeah.
And it turns. That when he's cornered, it turns.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah.
How do you think there's that sort of, I would say it's sort of like, there's two scenes in the film that I think are like centerpieces. One is the Meryl Streep, Viola Davis scene, which I think like opens the film up in a really important and powerful way because it's about the Bronx. It's about like New York City. It's about like, I don't think the film does a
about
great
race.
job.
It's
It's about
about
race, but I don't think the movie does a
fathers.
great job
Queerness.
of communicating.
Yes. Thank you.
It doesn't do a great job of beyond the accents, which are all middling. Of, like Meryl Streep's Bronx accent is, but it's fine. But it seems like it's a theater accent as opposed to a movie accent. A little bit. But I don't feel as situated in the Bronx as I would like to in the movie, and I think it's a bad choice that there isn't at least at the beginning the Bronx, New York City, because it is a movie about the Bronx. Like it's about Catholicism in
I would
general.
have appreciated a shot at Yankee Stadium. Of course.
Yeah.
Go Yankees! Go Yankees! Hey, champions!
Red Sox. Sorry.
But they could be listening to that on their radio, or we could like see a train.
Yeah.
Just one
Yeah.
train.
Just something.
And I spent most of the movie being like, is this in Boston? Is this in... It's not.
I thought it was in
Nah,
Boston
is it
too at some
Boston?
point.
Red Sox.
Fuck you guys. Why am I doing a New York accent for that? I got it back.
You're a transplant.
Yankees suck. I am a transplant. I'm not going back, dude.
Not going
I'm
back.
not going back. Now I'm doing it for the rest of the episode.
Hey, Philip Seymour Hoffman, you're kind of wicked.
Hey. You're kind of wicked.
You're kind of wicked.
What are you? What's wrong with
that's
you?
what they say.
Yeah, but we don't say you're kind of wicked.
Hey, I might be there
We'd
this
like,
weekend.
Hey, Phil.
You're wicked.
Phil. Hey. How's it going, kid?
And when
How's it
did
going?
you say wicked?
You're wicked cool.
Yeah, there you
You're
go.
wicked
Yeah.
cool. But then we don't say you're wicked. That doesn't
Yeah,
make
of course you
sense.
do.
No, we
Kind of
don't.
wicked.
I'm gonna be there this weekend. I will report
You going
back.
to Boston this weekend?
Well, not Boston, heaven forbid, but I will be in the Massachusetts general area.
Where are you going? You don't want to say on the
do
podcast.
you want to talk about this? Yeah. I was like, I mean, obviously, by the time this comes out, I'll be back.
So then it's fine.
But,
Give
all
me
right,
a
okay.
town. Give me a
Salem.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's that time.
Are you
Yeah.
going for,
Witchiness
are
is
you
in
going
the
for the
air.
witchiness?
No, visit some friends.
No, fucking bullshit. All right, well, that's
Fucking
fine.
bullshit.
Fucking bullshit.
And now I know that a normal coffee at Dunkin' Donuts in Massachusetts means like 3 sugars and like 4 cups.
give me a regular.
of milk.
You just literally say regular,
Yeah.
and they give you milk and sugar.
Yeah.
And it's like you drink it, and you're like,
It's like, how much fucking sugar is in this thing? But
So
I think,
much.
yes, I think the scene with Viola Davis is also important because, as Caitlin said, it opens it up to like the queerness of the young boy.
Mm-hmm.
It opens it up again to the absent father, which is like another resonance for me with like the absence of God, where basically she says, oh, his father's kind of like an abusive asshole to him.
Yeah.
yeah, is absent the right word? Because it's not that he's absent.
No,
it's that
he's too
Or
present.
maybe there's two
Yeah,
parts. But
yeah.
I maybe meant it in the sense of, yeah, okay, like obviously patriarchy in general is always
Gotcha.
poisonous.
Yeah,
But
of
just in
course.
the sense that it's not the kind of father figure anybody wants in their lives.
Right, of course.
Ugh,
Dads.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
dads. can't live without him.
Dang.
Cheers.
Okay, can't live with
Therapy. So I think, yeah, that scene's great.
red wine. So okay for right now.
But it also
Soon.
does feel very much like a stage production where this one character kind of appears, has a
Right.
very short scene, but it's kind of pivotal in the entire kind of play. Then like
It is a
hinges on
theatery
that.
moment.
Yeah, but she's great in it. She's amazing.
yeah.
in it.
This was kind of the thing that got her. I feel like got her career really going. Like she'd been around for a while, but it wasn't like. I mean, it's a 10-minute scene, and it kind of redoes the whole film a little,
Yeah.
recenters the whole
Yeah.
film, I suppose.
And we didn't talk about it either, but obviously the racial politics of what are like it's tempting to say something else about racial politics because Philip Seymour Hoffman basically says like without me and like protecting this boy, he's gonna have a really difficult time making it through this school. And obviously the implication, I think he says it directly too, the fact that he's not white, so he's like one of the only sympathetic kind of characters or people in his life, and obviously within that kind of particular scene.
And one of
Yeah.
the really most devastating shots in the film is one of the things that I appreciate with the movie that is both theatrical but also effective is that it's sort of centered around 3 different sermons, one about doubt, one about gossip, that's right, and one about leaving. And there's a shot of the boy crying at the end of the film that is like truly, it's really
Yeah.
hard to watch because it sort of makes you go like, oh yeah, actually the person who gets fucked here is of course this young boy.
Yeah.
There's Viola Davis makes reference to it, and it's sort of quiet, but it's echoed in when the other priest tells Father Flynn that he's wicked. That like basically it's a game recognized game. That she's sort of like, my kid is queer. His dad
Yeah.
will murder him for this, and if this priest sees something in him, which is also quietly saying like, why are some men in the priesthood?
Yeah.
Then like maybe having an ally for the 1 year is fine until we can get him out of this space.
And it's so well done
Yeah.
because it's not overstated. I mean, it's there, but it's not like you're not like it's not like overly written in that
No.
moment, which is really she communicates so much, which is her.
She does.
Yeah.
That scene, and then the sort of the showstopper between Meryl Streep and Phil Hoffman.
At the
It's got to
end.
be what 15 minutes of the
Yeah.
movie's runtime. I thought that was really good. I think they're both. I can't imagine what it would be like to be like, here's your scene where you're up against the American actress icon of forever, and you have to like. It's amazing how they all keep up with her. Like we haven't talked enough about how she's like not a monster, but she's massive in this movie. She like owns the movie in a way.
Yeah.
And it's even in that moment, he's so good at making about his own conviction. He's so good at being like, like not able to really, he's very good at making you feel for him. Mm-hmm. Is that the right way to put it? Like you just, there's always doubt.
or that you feel he's innocent.
Right.
And that's, and again, when he keeps saying like, well, call the pastor. She's like, well, actually, I spoke to the nun.
It's really,
and it's like, oh shit.
It's really impressive in that. So there's one of the things that we talked about a little bit is the way he sort of nonchalantly sits at her desk. And that's a great example of like, I love Phil Hoffman. He's kind of like, oh, I'm just going to bumble over and sit down. You know what I mean? Like it's just so expected and so clear how he does it. And he pulls out the notepad and is like, I want to write down what you say.
Yeah. That's
and
in the end.
So acceptable. Oh, I'm just going to write down what you say.
Yeah.
Because when you go to whatever, he's like...
Well, the first time he does it, too, there's a like great power play where she also says to him, like, oh, and cut your fingernails. They're long.
Yeah, after he has, like, all of the sugar that she put in her drawer for Lent and never took out again, which is, like, totally mentioned to reclaim her seat in some ways. But it's... What I took from this is also that he's going to write down everything she says, but the minute that he kind of breaks protocol and is alone with her, she says multiple times, there needs to be another party in the room. There needs to be another party in the room. Right. And I think that that's sort of what started me into my spiral of like, this is getting a little bit too contemporary and a little bit overwhelming, is just her being like, I know what's about to happen in this space, and it's only something untoward if you're like unwilling to follow protocol.
Right. And it's interesting how like the assumption that he can just write it down and it's fine, where she's like, no, I need someone else to be here to hear what I have to like it's I sort of didn't even think about that in the moment because this movie's just
This movie's something.
It's something. Yeah. What did you guys think of the moment where she talks about her husband dying in World War II?
Oh, it resonated with me, but not in any sort of like, oh, I really have to think about this.
Because your husband died in World War II?
Yeah, just bringing way too many memories. It's like, oh God, I have to fucking process this again. No, it was just kind of, I mean, why did it stick out for you?
I like, well,
the idea that she had this life
stuck out to me
before?
because it felt theatrical. In the sense that it's one thing that...
That's right, it then cut to the beaches of Normandy.
One thing that
Tom Hanks.
John Patrick... oh my God.
and he's raiding the beaches.
They've not a big enough budget.
Earn this. They just repurpose B-roll from Saving Private Ryan. No,
Spielberg
because
has
I
a
think
suit.
that's one of the moments in the film where maybe you just show her with a photo of him, or maybe she has his dog tags, or maybe there's something that could reveal that. What?
Or just imagine her like pulling out his dog tags. He died in the beaches of Normandy for you.
Whatever it is, the ability to do that without it being overly stated. But one of my favorite moments in the movie is when she's caught listening to the kids' radio. Mm-hmm. I love it. It's so endearing that she's like, I was just listening to the news. Mass media is great.
I love the picture with the Pope. Or the scene with the picture of the Pope.
Yeah.
Or I think she puts it up and she's like, he's like, which Pope? That's not even the right Pope. And she's like, doesn't matter which Pope it is.
It's a reflective surface.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I just love the idea, like, it doesn't matter which Pope it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like,
well, it's also an interesting moment that speaks to like the way that like, have you ever been on a military base? Basically
all the time.
All the time.
Well, I was part of that when I raided Area 51 last week. We saw the aliens. It was amazing. Did I tell you about that? I was doing that.
Did you? Oh, Instagram stories.
Yeah.
I listened to a episode of Reply All today about that. They talked about it. Anyway,
I was
if you
there.
go to a military base, that there's always a picture of the current president.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. Well, not. I haven't been in one since.
And the airport too.
Since Shithead took office, the last one. But how all of these spaces have to have like the picture of the guy who's in charge in them. It's just it's like a nice touch that the movie is. I didn't go to Catholic school, my parents did, but it all feels very rooted in a kind of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I would wonder with Vatican II whether an old pope would be something they were interested in keeping around. I think I made a TV show in Newark in the mayor's office, and it was when Cory Booker was the mayor, and you would walk down through some of the administrative offices and they would all have just like photos of Sharp James, who was like the super corrupt predecessor. And it's something where it's like they're there a little bit as a signal to Cory Booker about who they give their respect to, because he has to walk by them every day.
Right.
And that's the same, I don't know. I mean, this is something where it's like, now this is a glass surface. But I just thought that was a really nice touch.
Vatican II sort of like started its trend up. I looked this up in 1959.
Okay.
So, and was sort of like mainly, and again, I can't really parse it out, but I know my understanding of it is that hardcore Catholics would have been like, I don't recognize this. Mm-hmm. So you have someone like, and we haven't really talked about her, but Amy Adams' character, who's kind of stuck between a sort of old school fire and brimstone church and a new sort of more progressive church. And you have Meryl Streep, who's firmly sort of classically fire and brimstone. And this sort of guise of Father Flynn as the kind of like, no, we have to reform. We have to be part of the community. We have to be open. We have to teach these kids basketball. We have to, like, you know, talk to the girls about boys that they have crushes on. Like, the idea of a priest having a conversation like that is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Even now. So it's just, it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of like, the movie doesn't hint at that stuff because it keeps it contained to the characters, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in Catholicism.
But there's an interesting, like, the age of Meryl Streep, and this is why I liked learning the like details about her husband, is that this is a person who was a functioning adult who was probably employable, who made a choice to take the cloth.
Yeah.
And she had a life before that, as opposed to Amy Adams, who is like a young novitiate. And who is someone who, like, this is her first job. This is the world that she knows. She probably went to high school and then became a nun. So she's really signing on for the church in a totally different way than Meryl Streep.
Right.
And has, like, different illusions and disillusions about it. Whereas Meryl's like, well, no, I joined this because I liked the old way. And because I like couldn't imagine my life going forward in a secular space. And now you guys are trying to make this like more comfy for secular people. Mm-hmm. Whereas Amy Adams is entering the church where it's like, we're kind of like, it's fine, Frosty the Snowman. Like, it's all going to be okay. But, and so just the two of them together, like how wide-eyed Amy Adams is as a young nun who is also like believes the best in like being charming with her students.
Yeah.
Whereas Meryl's like, nah, everyone has to pay attention because that's how you like get through life.
Yeah. Right.
But that it was her choice. So it isn't that she's like a salty, like 50-year like veteran nun.
Yes.
That she came in, that like she like really, really made a commitment when she had other options.
Maybe that's kind of the revelation that I don't think occurred to me because she feels like a forever nun at the beginning of the movie.
And that's why they have to, that's why they can't just show you a picture. They have to have her talk about
you're right.
the moment when she like, also the moment when like God probably felt the most absent in her life, where she like moved towards God.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Latecomers are usually often more zealous too.
Say that again?
Latecomers?
Yes.
So like are usually more zealous.
Yeah, it's like people that convert for their partners are like way more than the partners usually do.
Mm-hmm. Quick question, by the way, as somebody who's not Catholic, was Vatican II the rare sequel that was as good as the original?
Ask Mel Gibson.
Well, I will definitely not ask Mel Gibson.
He'll call you sugar tits. Well, I feel like we've really gotten somewhere here.
Yeah, I think we've solved all the problems with the Catholic Church.
I still have my doubts.
Oh God, I have my doubts.
Ooh, chips.
And
Caitlin,
guac.
do you have anything that you would like to promote? Tell us about that we should know about.
Well, like what was the name of this series that you said you just referenced?
It's called Doubts.
The Cory Booker thing.
Oh, the show
you
that I made no, I made it in 2010. So
I want to hear about it.
If you want to see our future president, Cory Booker, in action, the show was called Brick City. We did 2 seasons of it. I only worked on the first one.
Brick City?
Brick City.
Okay.
I was very proud of that show.
That's cool.
Yeah, I got to hang out in Newark a whole bunch.
And what are you working on now?
I'm making a movie about the Church of Satan,
Ooh,
and as a nice like topper to our Catholicism episode, I'm making an experimental nonfiction film about the Church of Satan, and I also, for my job, I do pitch-based short documentary programs where we fund short films and also give them a bunch of mentorship, and we're doing 2, one in Amsterdam for global
Ooh,
climate
nice.
crisis stories. And so what I'm doing right now is reading like dozens of regionally based climate crisis stories, which is actually like kind of nice to see who in the world is talking about like what's happening in their community and
In their
how
backyard,
many English people are flying to other places in the world to talk about what's happening in their community. But it's going to be cool. So it's something where like I don't get to leave to go to the march, but hopefully in a couple of months we'll have put our money where our mouth is in terms of some sort of activism with that.
Are applications for that still open? Or
No.
is it oh, okay.
No.
You
No,
guys
I'm not working
out.
on it. I'm like, I made a TV show in 2010. I have this thing that no one can apply to.
No.
Yeah.
What's your website?
What's my website?
Yeah.
My website is my name, CaitlinMaeBurke.com.
So then people can
And
see
we'll put up on the metadata for the episode.
Ooh, metadata.
Yeah.
Listen
Oh,
to George.
yeah.
Listen to
I'm a
the
podcaster.
English professor talking metadata.
It's podcasting.
I'm feeling
lingo.
that was a little rude. I'm sorry. I was
all
just
good.
kidding.
It wasn't rude at all.
Oh, I don't know. When
Asshole.
is this going to go up? I can promote Other Men Need Help. I should probably do that.
We'll tweet at you.
Goes live in 2 weeks.
So what?
2 weeks from yesterday.
October before your event on the 8th.
October.
Okay, so can I get?
9th?
Can you
Yeah.
edit this so that I can? Do
Well,
that?
we might leave all this in because it's honest, but yeah, I think you're good. Let me just double check the date one more time. That event is in October.
Yeah.
This will go. Oh shit!
October
this will go
9th.
live October 9th.
No.
No.
Can we maybe put it up a day early?
Listen?
I mean, I
asshole,
know that-
I'm the one that edits.
I
This.
know that really. Get on it, Liam.
Well,
Do it tonight.
Do it tonight. Okay, I'll go. We could probably drop it a little early.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give us the pitch.
Or like if it's running late, I'll just give you the pitch and then you can put
Give
it
us
in
the
the
pitch.
editing.
Yes.
I produce a podcast.
We ran out of tape. I'm just kidding.
Oh, because I have one in my pocket.
I have a tape recorder attached to this.
This is a podcast house. We have a whole other Zoom in the other room.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm also trying to run this out so that Mark will come home like Three's Company and get to be a special guest star on this episode. So previous guest of the show, friend of the show, Mark Pagan, produces a podcast called Other Men Need Help, which he has discussed a lot. And I am also a part of that team. We're doing a live show on October 8th at Caveat with
it's a
some like
Caveat.
very special guests and a lot of funny people. And probably Mark makes these candles of like male icons. And so you can get a special treat for coming.
Nice.
Also, I believe it's October 18th.
When?
Yes, October
18th.
18th.
You guys are doing a live episode
That's true.
at Brick.
Yeah. We're doing an event where we'll do an episode of the show live with live music and then also sort of talk about the process of making the episodes.
Awesome.
Yes.
It's a great podcast.
Thank you.
It's a
Okay.
great podcast.
Thanks.
And this is a great podcast.
Aw,
and I'm
thanks.
Liam Billingham.
I was George Fragopoulos.
I'm new to the show, Caitlin Mae Burke.
the show. And this was
Do you want to say it, Caitlin?
Sure, Oeuvre Busters.
yeah.
We did it.
I
We
still
survived.
have my doubts.
Oh, poor Liam. Well, first of all, let me say what I really love about this film is that it ends at a place of complete and utter conviction. You know who the good guy is, you know who the bad guy is.
Totally.
And it's all tied up with a really nice bow.
I'd also
So-
like to say it's good that we finally have a film that has no politics for you to discuss.
Exactly. So